Morning glory and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh, starting with a bang today. Senator Eric Schmitt has a great new book out. It's called The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. He joins me live. Senator, good to talk to you. Are we sure that Missouri's still in the SEC? I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, 3-0 and got
Okay.
the Gamecocks at home on Saturday night. So here we go.
I thought maybe there was a Division A and Division B. I just keep missing it. Senator, this is a great book.
Oh, how
This
dare
is a
you.
fabulous book.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to begin. Hey, how did you get how did you find John Sauer? I listened to all of his arguments. He's a fabulous advocate. Where'd you find him?
You know what's unique about John is John is a St. Louisan like I am, and actually the same age. I've known John. He's an incredible talent. And he's one of these guys. He literally is the smartest lawyer I've ever met in my whole life, and he's humble and he's hardworking. Those are rare combinations. And he was my Solicitor General in Missouri, and now he's the Solicitor General of the United States. And a lot of the stories that we tell in the book, The Last Line of Defense, which I assumed you appreciate actually with the topics you always cover, was really about the success we had in taking on the left in the courtroom and kind of holding the line until President Trump and reinforcements could arrive in Washington.
I want everyone to know that if they want the gory details of what Senator Schmitt calls the quote the censorship enterprise of the Biden administration, it's all right here in one chapter. I'm not very often surprised, and I am rarely stunned. But I was really stunned by the list of demands that you put on page 97, 98 that the Biden administration made of social media companies during its reign of terror over social media. Were you stunned? Because 87 different people, 20 of whom, 83 federal officials, 20 of whom were at the White House, made demands on Twitter and other social media things. Were you amazed by this?
Yeah, that was really the discovery in the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, Hugh, which you got to remember, this is before Elon Musk buys Twitter. This was all called the conspiracy theory. We filed the lawsuit. And this book takes you behind the scenes of some strategic decisions that were made, and not for lawyers, although I hope lawyers read it, but for people who are just watching this stuff unfold with like a disinformation governance board. We decided before we sought injunctive relief to stop the government from what they were doing, to get discovery. And when we got the reams of emails and text messages from high-ranking government officials directly in a secret portal to some of the biggest media companies in the history of the world to silence conservatives, it was shocking. I mean, then we took the deposition of Anthony Fauci. That's detailed in the book. We took the deposition of Elvis Chan, who was the FBI agent who was pre-bunking the Hunter Biden laptop story. So I think your audience is really going to enjoy this, but be equally shocked to the extent that the Biden administration went to silence conservatives.
One of the messages in Biden v. Missouri, Missouri v. Biden, that you found out from the White House to Twitter, are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here, and I want it today. This is the government. You and I know about the First Amendment. Did they have no lawyers in the White House counsel's office? I mean, it's astonishing to me.
Everybody was on board, Hugh, and they felt so justified, whether it was on taking out President Trump's political supporters, or especially on COVID. I mean, I think one of the things I fundamentally believe is power doesn't necessarily corrupt, but it does reveal. And you saw during COVID what even local officials were willing to do. If you uttered anything negative about a vaccine or masks, they went to work. The CDC, Hugh, had specific words and phrases that they gave to social media companies to censor. So the government, of course, can't silence dissent, but you can't outsource that either, which is exactly what they were doing. And, there were other messages saying this comes from the highest levels of the White House. You know who the F I'm talking about. I mean, they were very explicit, threatening investigations, getting rid of Section 230 protections. They meant business. And it wasn't my words, but a federal district court judge said this was the biggest affront to the First Amendment in American history.
Very well laid out for laymen and lawyers alike. Let me talk about Elvis Chan, who you mentioned. I did not know the name until I read The Last Line of Defense. And Senator, I told Justice Barrett yesterday, and I remind you, you got to say the name of the book 7 times in every interview. Last Line of Defense, Last Line of Defense, so people in the audience will remember Last Line of Defense. I never heard about Elvis Chan until today. I want to talk about him, but I also want to talk about him in the context of the Kash Patel fiery exchange with Adam Schiff today in the Senate. And the conservative critics of Director Patel do not understand how deeply compromised a segment of the FBI is. It's really, really the administrative state fighting back against Director Patel and the Trump administration. Can you combine both? Let people know who Elvis Chan is and what he represents that Patel is up against.
I will, and you can read all about it in The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, Hugh, available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold right now. But yes,
Bingo.
we took the deposition. We took the deposition of Elvis Chan, and what's really interesting is they were having, they knew the Hunter Biden laptop was real in November of 2019. Okay, it was authenticated. In 2020, they would have monthly, then weekly meetings with these social media companies in Northern California, which is where Elvis Chan was stationed, and told them, look out for a quote unquote Russian hack and leak operation. Yoel Roth, who was the integrity guy at Twitter, had in a sworn affidavit that he specifically mentioned the Hunter Biden laptop. So they know it's real. They're telling them this is Russian disinformation, the Hunter Biden laptop, and then they work overtime to censor the story. But it runs much deeper than that. In the prelude to the 2016 election, of course, you have the Russiagate hoax. You have all the stuff they tried to sideline in administration. The FBI was in on that with James Comey. And I'll also point out one of the real quirks of history. There was a guy that was the general counsel of the FBI in November of 2016. His name was James Baker. You want to guess who was the general counsel for Twitter in November of 2020? James Baker. So this runs really deep. This book helps expose the lie, and Kash Patel in the FBI has a big job in rooting out these administrative state actors that think they're more important than the people, and they think they can actually, sort of sideline a president and subvert the will of the American people. We can't have that in this country.
Every chapter is a revelation. I'm going to jump chapters now to the left-wing prosecutors, whether it is Kimberly Gardner in your home state in St. Louis, Larry Krasner in Philly, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco. They're all over the country. I want to know if you have an idea, a working theory of why Soros and his minions want to destroy law and order in the United States. What is the objective?
You know, I get that question a lot, actually, Hugh. And from my perspective, he sort of arbitraged the system. It was relatively inexpensive to elect these in Democrat areas, these radically progressive prosecutors who weren't interested in fighting violent crime. And by the way, said we're not going to prosecute other kinds of crime either. So he had a tremendous impact. Why? Well, if you want to actually remake society, people have to become discouraged. They have to feel like, society has sort of abandoned them. There's only one person in a jurisdiction that can make those charging decisions, and it's the prosecutor. You don't need a bunch of social workers. You need a prosecutor. Maybe you need social workers in the world, but for the one person that can make a charging decision, you need a real prosecutor. And it didn't used to be this way, Hugh. There were Democrats in St. Louis City that would prosecute violent crime that wasn't part of their ideology. But that changed a lot. And 2020, of course, was the accelerant in the summer of love. And Kim Gardner in St. Louis, we talk about in the book, The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court. She wouldn't really prosecute the rioters to the fullest extent of the law, but everybody remembers the images of the McCloskeys coming out to defend their property. Yeah. She was very much interested in prosecuting them, which of course would have a chilling effect on people exercising their Second Amendment rights. So this is very deep ideology that's meant to disrupt civil society. Then people, in that chaos, then they look for more government solutions and abandon sort of what America's always been.
I'm jumping another chapter now to CRT DEI and When Parents Were the Enemy. Quote, for a long time, the warped lessons that were being taught in our schools were hidden from our parents. Once again, we were seeing the left's playbook in action. A few concerned parents would get something labeled that the left had to take seriously, but get them labeled as domestic terrorists, and the left had to open the toolbox and take out everything, including the FBI. Do you think we have turned that back, Senator?
I think it's in retreat. I think DEI is definitely in retreat. CRT is definitely in retreat. But the concern I think that I have and had in a judiciary hearing with Hermit Dillon was, let's make sure it's not becoming just a different name, right? This ideology, this cultural Marxism isn't just becoming something that we're calling, different flowery language. But it was very clear when I was Attorney General, I write about it in the book, Last Line of Defense, you can get on Amazon right now, is that, and by the way, New York Times bestseller, President Trump loves the book too, Hugh. And what I found was during COVID, we opened up a portal for parents to communicate us. We sued like 54 school districts in Missouri for their masking policies. We got them to back off. To this day, mostly moms come up to me in grocery stores and thank me for that action. But we opened up a portal that unveiled, sort of crazy stuff like my kid decided not to wear a mask. The school then isolated the kid, had the kid eat lunch by himself on the stage in the middle of the gym. These adults should have known better. but also when it came, we use that portal for DEI in our classrooms. And this wasn't in, New York or even St. Louis or Kansas City, but in Springfield, Missouri. You saw the sort of this radical ideology where teachers were being taught and trained to view the classroom by oppressor and oppressed. They had the gender unicorn. They had the wheel of oppression. All this crazy stuff. And then also a school district, we found when a parent communicated with us that kids were being forced, grade school kids were being forced to do something called a privilege walk, where take a step, everybody has their eyes closed, take a step forward if you're white, take a step forward if your parents are married, take a step forward if your dad has a job. And then when the kids would open their eyes, there was all this degree of separation, trying to, again, divide the room. This is core sort of cultural Marxism, and it's in our schools, and we have to root it out. And I think that's why you saw a lot of parents run for school board. That's why we're turning the tide now, but it's in retreat, but it's not dead, and we got to stay vigilant on it.
Now, you put on, I'm going to the beginning of the book at the end of the interview. You said in November 2024, the fever broke. My colleague Charlie was murdered last week. The fever didn't break. It's sort of like those fires in California that smolder and then they burst out again as soon as the wind picks up. I don't think it's gone, Senator. Do you?
Well, I think what I meant by that was the crazy excesses we saw during COVID, the crazy excesses we saw from the Biden administration, the lockdowns, the DEI struggle sessions, the CRTs in our school, the Biden censorship enterprise, all that stuff. The American people sat in their own jury box and rendered a verdict, and they voted against that and for President Trump. So in that sense, I think America collectively said we want to get back to common sense. But to your point, as it relates to sort of this kind of radical leftist ideology, which is played out in the YouGov poll that was, recently came out, that a full 25% of self-identified very liberal Americans think that political violence is justified, compared to 3% of very conservatives. Now, that's 3% too many, okay? But the truth of the matter is there's a real problem on the left right now with political violence, and it played out in the most horrific way with our friend Charlie Kirk, who literally was speaking his mind and shot in the throat in an attempt to silence him and assassinate him on live television. And it's just, I'm not playing this both sides thing. If you look at the way this is playing out, the left has a problem with this kind of radical agenda that justifies assassinations and violence, and we have to call it out for what it is.
Senator, I have one more question for you about the last line of defense, how to beat the left in court, available at Amazon.com right now. Would you stand by for a minute? We have to do a technical detail on the program. I'll be right back with you. I am back now with Senator Eric Schmitt, author of The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, available at Amazon.com right now on the New York Times bestseller list. Senator, I wanted to keep you over because I read everything. I thought it's a fabulous book. But then you punched me in the solar plex when I get to the epilogue and I read about Stephen, your son. How is Stephen doing?
Stephen's doing okay. Stephen's a happy kid for your audience. Stephen was born with a rare genetic condition, was diagnosed with epilepsy. He's on the autism spectrum and is nonverbal. Stephen's 21 now, but going, especially when he was really young, he still to this day has seizures nearly daily. But he had a 4-hour seizure when he was really young and in the ICU for over a week. And for me, I went through this discernment process of what I really wanted to do with my life. And Stephen was really the impetus for me to get into public life and try to make a difference. And so Stephen's my kind of my touchstone, and it is so important to me in so many different ways.
That is the best argument for being active in public life that I've ever read, or at least the equal of any of them. And you didn't lead with it. You waited with it. Someone had to finish the book to get there. And it came after, my eyebrows were up when you write How to Win, Dismantle the Administrative State. I agree with that. It's easier said than done, but I do believe you've got the inspiration because of Stephen. Very last question. Are we going to dismantle the administrative state? I think of things like a second reconciliation that repeals the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978 in large part, restores the federal government to a size that can be stuff like that. Do you think we can do that?
I do. I'm very hopeful. I think, and why I have a chapter dedicated to the administrative state and the last line of defense that people can get on Amazon right now, which is to kind of mark this 100-year march that really kind of began with our worst president, Woodrow Wilson, that sort of culminated, of course, with this leviathan of government agencies that was weaponized against the American people during the Biden administration. So I think the combination of the Chevron deference being overturned, we had a working group that kind of laid out some options on being more specific with statutes, but also making sure that we take advantage of the opportunity. Maybe it's the REINS Act. I certainly support that. And for your audience, that would be before a new government regulation goes into effect that has an economic impact of pick your number. Congress would have to vote on it first. I would hope we could move something like that. But you also need a willing participant, Hugh, in the administration, the Article 2 branch. And we have that now with President Trump. He's trying to rein those powers in. And I think that's a great sign of inspiration and hope for us.
Senator Eric Schmitt, thank you. The Last Line of Defense, How to Beat the Left in Court, available at Amazon.com right now. Congratulations on the book, and come back soon.
Thanks, Hugh.